do the stream with you two in it. Because I have this already down anyway, so. All right, everybody, welcome to the live stream. I'm gonna do a redux of my series because overall in the NBA community, I feel like people just lose context on NBA history. So, as someone who pays attention to basketball, as someone who pays attention to history, someone who likes combining the two, someone who understands context, which is very important in said community, I think it's important that we need to establish a greatest of all time argument and understand and layer it based on the important factors of said argument. So these are the factors that I'm stating this by. So first, stats, and with stats, records, because they're they're linked. Stats are very important to the argument. They're not the end all be all, because with stats you have to include the context of those stats. For example, Steve Kerr has the highest 3-point percentage in NBA history. However, Steve Kerr himself averaged about 6 points a game. So with that type of thing in mind, you have to keep the context of the stats in mind when you're doing a greatest of all time list or a greatest of all time argument for a said player. Next thing is accomplishments. Outside of stats, there are things like Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, Finals MVP. I know you're lost, Jen. It's fine. We're gonna go over all this stuff. This is just the beginning of it. I'm gonna teach you about all this stuff. So accomplishments are things outside of statistics in terms of like awards, all-star selections, and things of that nature. The next thing we're talking about is narratives. Narratives drive the story of the player along, and it's important to note those because sometimes you can see someone say, oh, this guy is an aggressive player. This person is a bad teammate. This person just wants to win to the point of excess. So it's important to understand that these narratives are crucial in what makes what makes a player either a great player or a great teammate or anything of that anything in relation. Then the eye test. The eye test is also very important. You have to look at the player on the court and see how he moves. Does he make the right play? Does he have good court vision? Does he have good defensive stances and wings and stuff like that? And sorry, my mom's dog's in acting up for some reason. But it's important to understand by looking at the players to see how smoothly they move, and like throughout their career, how does that change? Do they gain anything? Do they lose anything outside of athleticism? Because athleticism gets lost over time anyway. But we need to see how they adjust to that. Rings are always going to be a major point of conversation to have. Some people on this list will have 2 rings. Some people will have 3. Some people will have 6. One person will have 11, and it's a lot. It's a lot. But sometimes rings aren't the only defining factor in these arguments, and I'm going to make sure to tell you about that and how these rings are won and lost and other things of that nature. The last 2 factors are clutch factors and choking. Those are also interlinked because in order to be clutch, you have to be able to make points in the last couple minutes of the game, make that last clutch shot. Do people rely on you to take that last shot? How good you are at that last shot, and other key factors of choking, which is, oh, are you unreliable in the clutch? Do you not do well when the pressure's on you? And things are just layered in that aspect. And throughout this list, we're gonna be talking about players who, some of them are just really good in the clutch. Some of them have really high shooting percentages, or they have a high volume of shots compared to some people who are just terrible in the clutch and they just choke games away. And then there's people, in the middle who have good games and bad games. It really depends on the player and how we see them. Now, before I get into the list of the players that are in the greatest of all time argument and the players that I will be going over through the series, I'd like to make some honorable mentions and I'll tell you why they aren't on the list. For future note, for those of you who may watch, like people like OSN and Cash Nasty and all those guys, some of those guys don't think about their lists before they make them. They don't look at everything around them. They just say, "Oh, this guy's should be this." That's not the case here. You got to do your homework. One of the honorable mentions is Dirk Nowitzki, one of the greatest European players to play right now, to play in the era of basketball that we are currently living in. He's retired a couple years ago. Dirk Nowitzki has one ring, and the reason why I excluded him from the list is because it's not just his fault that he's got one ring, but the minimum criteria I have for my list is 2 rings or up, because I feel like 2 rings or more, you have some consistency with getting a team to further in the playoffs. And Dirk Nowitzki is one of those guys that has only 1 ring, so I had to pass on him. Oscar Robertson, again, he only has 1 ring, and you can argue that Kareem got him that ring, but you can also argue vice versa for Kareem, so that's why Oscar Robertson's not in that list. Bernard King, he played with the Knicks. However, most of the time when he played with the Knicks teams, Willis Reed was also on the team, and Willis Reed was a much better player. You could argue that, and especially since he won the Finals MVPs for both of those finals. Bernard King was a very good scorer, but he got injured and he never got the chance to win his own championship without Willis Reed there, so that's why he's not on the list. Moses Malone won a championship with the 76ers, and I feel like just the one championship isn't enough, even though he's very good and he's high on a lot of statistical categories, including rebounds and blocks. Ray Allen, he has 1 ring. Well, technically he has 2 rings, but with one of the rings, he wasn't a star player on that team. He was at the tail end of his career. And the ring he won with the Celtics, you could argue that he wasn't even within the top 2. He was a third leg of that big 3. So you could argue that he wasn't even the best player on that team either. So that's the reason why he's not on this list. Kevin Garnett, same reasoning. It took him forever to win the 1 ring, and the one time he won a ring, like, he was the defensive anchor on that team, but he wasn't the KG of, like, him dropping 25, 26 points, 18 rebounds a game. He wasn't that KG. Kawhi Leonard, he has 2 rings. However, his first ring with San Antonio, he wasn't the star player. He just won the Finals MVP because he had to guard LeBron, which in it of itself is a task. And then the second ring would probably be the more valid ring because he brought the Raptors a championship. He brought a team that had no rings a championship. So that's why I feel like he deserves to be an honorable mention, but he's not going to be in that conversation. And the last one, Dr. J, an amazing dunker. He has 1 ring. He's an amazing player. However, again, the criteria is 2 rings or more. He only has the 1. I mean, there's other people who don't have rings who could be potentially on this list. Charles Barkley, Karl Malone for their statistical excellence alone. But we're gonna talk about now we're gonna talk about the players who are on that list, who I will go over. This is in order of rings from highest amount of rings to lowest amount of rings. So the one with the most rings, 11 rings, Bill Russell. He's obviously on that list, even though he's an older player and like some people don't count the 50s and 60s rings. We're counting them in this instance. It matters. But again, that goes back to narrative and eye test and all those things. So we're going to come back to that when we talk about Bill Russell in the future video. 6 rings, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, great player. He has 6 rings. Michael Jordan, obviously, a lot of people call him the GOAT. So there's that. 5 rings, Magic Johnson, one of the greatest point guards ever. Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, one of the best shooting guards of all time. Tim Duncan, one of the greatest power forwards of their time, and brought San Antonio their rings that they have. George Mikan, he was a Minneapolis Laker, which was what the Los Angeles Lakers, which is what the Los Angeles Lakers is today. They were the Minneapolis Lakers of the late 40s, early 50s. 4 rings, we have Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most dominant centers of his time. And then we have LeBron James, who just recently won his 4th ring, and he's still in the NBA. 3, the 3 rings, Larry Bird, one of the greatest Celtics ever, and arguably one of the best small forward ever. LeBron has 4 rings, so you can kind of say that LeBron's a better small forward than Larry Bird, but it's still a debate. Dwayne Wade, the 3rd best shooting guard of all time. Him, and I also have Stephen Curry in the 3 rings list. Both of them, you could argue that they shouldn't be on this list, but I'm going to put forth the argument in future videos that they should be on this list. 2 rings, Wilt Chamberlain, also argued to be one of the most dominant centers of his time, the man who scored 100 points. We'll get to that later. Jerry West, one of the greatest point guards outside of Magic Johnson, is what people would say. He's also the logo. The logo of the NBA is basically Jerry West. Next up, we have Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the greatest centers of his time. Stop. Excuse me. That's my mom's dog. He's acting up. Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the greatest centers ever, and arguably the best post player in NBA history. Then we have Isaiah Thomas, who put the Detroit Pistons on the map, and is one of the greatest small point guards ever. Then we have Willis Reed, the Knicks center, who I mentioned when we were talking about Bernard King, one of the greatest Knicks players ever. And then last but not least, I'm going to put, and this is, you can argue this all you want, Kevin Durant, one of the greatest players of this era, outside of LeBron. And you can argue that he's a snake and he didn't deserve the rings, but we will talk about that when we get to his turn. Now, what I did before in the past videos, I started with the highest amount of rings and went down. This time, I think I'm going to start with the lowest amount of rings and go up, because there's more people with 2 rings than there are with like 6 and 11. So I figured I'll do the 2 ring guys first, because there's less of them, and I can just pile on more and more as we go along. So we're gonna start with the 2 rings first. Then we'll be doing 3 rings, and then 4 rings, 5 rings, 6 rings, and then Bill Russell's the last one. He's 11 rings. So that's what we're going to be doing here through this channel for the next couple of weeks. I would say since there's what? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. 18 players. I guess I could just do like maybe 2 a week. Michael Jordan, the best of all time. Well, we're gonna make that. That's gonna be a thing that's gonna come up later. LeBron. Oh Lord, we're already getting started. Troll comments. Cat. What did I say, Casper? Not right now. Well, hold on. I gotta get off so my mom's dog won't be mad. But we're gonna set a schedule. We're gonna do 2 a week. That's how we're gonna play it by ear. Where does Wayne Gretzky? Wrong sport. Koala. Wrong sport. That's hockey. That's it. Jesus, if I didn't know who you were, I think you wouldn't be trolling me right now. So that's where we are right now. I think we're going to do 2 a week. I think we're going to start on Friday. We're going to start with we'll start with Hakeem Olajuwon because he's one of my favorite players in that 2 ring list. So we'll start with him, and then we'll just go around. I'll probably put a poll up, see which person will be next. All right. Thanks for viewing my live stream. If you guys have any questions, feel free to message me on YouTube or Twitter. I'll put the links on my page somewhere, and